Well, good afternoon. How's everybody? Was anybody on that tax thing for the last couple of hours?
No,
My
I didn't make
stars.
it.
Wow, yeah. That was a lot of information. I don't think I thought I talked fast. Holy Christmas. This person who did this, she spoke faster than my ears were running as fast as they could to keep up.
Any
But
highlights, let me know.
and some interesting and decent information. So it was definitely worthwhile. However, so the next 59 minutes or so are yours for any questions that you might have. We did an impromptu Ask Rick Almost Anything money edition last week, and this business edition, the normal edition of Ask Rick Almost Anything, was already calendared. So we're going to reserve this for business-based questions. Although there's few enough of us on the call that we can really do kind of any kind of question. So I leave that to you. Where do you want to start? What's burning a hole in your brain?
Rick, I have
Yes,
a
Lisa.
quick question. Oh, sorry. I've brought this up a couple of times before, and I am still lingering and laboring over this. I have these clients I've worked with for a long time, year and a half, put in numerous offers, showed them numerous homes. I've had multiple discussions with them that they need to go in, make their offers, think about the work they want to do on the house later, because you have to own first before you can do work. I've talked to them about taking a break because this may not be the climate for them in order to purchase a home on the terms that they're comfortable with. They say, no, 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 we're engaged. They live apart. They want to get on with their lives. I feel like I'm not asking the right questions. I've never been comfortable in asking personal questions with people, but clearly I am not communicating what I need to in order to get them to come to an understanding of what they need to do, or maybe not do.
Yeah, and so is the question, what are those things?
Yeah, what could you guide me in maybe what kind of questions I should be asking, or maybe the way to word them? I mean, I'm at a loss these days with these clients.
Yeah.
Outside.
So I'll say a couple of different things, and the one of the things I'm going to say will not be very popular, and yet I'll say it anyway because it's hard to be all things to all people. And so one of the avenues that you perhaps should or need to consider is just cutting these people loose.
Right.
I mean, and especially when we go on month after month after month after month, it gets harder and harder to let them go, because in our heads we start to calculate the time we've spent, and so we hang on for dear life to say, well, I have to sell them something now just to kind of make up for and yet we keep spending time and keep spending time. So I so appreciate that what you said was, I'm going to take that back on me. It may not be you, it may be them, it may be you, but it also may be them, right? So, and if it's them, the education process kicks into play, and some people are not coachable, right? And so just to go on record as saying, sometimes you have to have a point where you decide to maybe cut people loose. So let's start there. Now let's go back in and actually answer the question you asked. If it were me, I would do a complete and utter, like, take 2 or take 77 or whatever take it is, right? And what I mean by that is, yeah, right. What I mean by that is start with a brand new, almost like give them a call and say, hey, you know what we're going to do, and just humor me because this will be fun, I promise, right? We're going to pretend that we literally just met. We're going to start this relationship all over again to make sure that I've given you every available piece of information to help you make the decisions you need to come out on top and win the very next house that you make an offer on. So if just humor me, I'm literally going to hang up the phone and call you and say, hey, it's lovely to meet you. Let's set an appointment. I mean, I know it sounds ridiculous, but helping them really see a reset may help them reset their brain and move forward. And then you have to have a consult, the way we've been talking about having those consults, literally setting very clear expectations with all of the market conditions and data, so that these people understand exactly how things are moving, how fast they're moving, who's winning, right? If it were me, I would do a almost like a little cheat sheet of, here are the things that sellers in the last 12 months, sellers have made decisions based on, right? Don't make it about what buyers are doing, make it about what sellers are making decisions on, and list out. So sellers are making decisions based on qualified buyers. Sellers are making decisions based on terms in the contract, such as reduced or waived contingencies for things like mortgage or appraisal or inspections. Utilizing contract documents instead of offer to purchase documents, shortening up time periods if in fact there are some contingencies. Sellers have also chosen to accept the fact that they're getting 5 to 10% above their asking price. And so, you know, what is the, and if it were me, are these people who are using financing or cash?
They're financing. And what I'm finding, and I can't draw it out of them, is they look in the kind of same price range, but maybe there'll be a $25,000 difference in a particular home, but they will offer less for that home. And they may offer $50,000, $60,000 more for another home. And when I ask them, you know, would you like to, you know, to increase that offer to give yourself a better chance, you know, because there are multi-offers on the table, they'll say, no, we can't afford it because we have work we need to do on the house.
Yeah.
I just want to hit my head up against the wall.
Yeah. They're spending too much money. They're looking in a price range that they really shouldn't be looking in, and that's what I'm hearing when someone says that to me, right? They're not looking at, you need to move them down $50,000 or $75,000 so that they can afford to pay 10% or so over the asking price and still have their 30 or 40 or whatever $1,000 to do whatever work. So I would reposition them if it were me. The other thing I would do at this point is, and you almost never hear me say what I'm about to say, I would, after you've asked all the questions, I would then stop asking questions and be far more directive. And what I mean by that is in scenarios where you're writing up an offer, I don't think at this point I would be saying things like, so would you like to increase your offer? I would look at what they're writing and say, okay, that's not going to do it. Sorry, that's not going to cut it.
Yeah.
So we either need to make a different decision here, or let's just not pedal down the path with this particular house. Let's move on to a different house, because that's not going to cut it. We've been doing this for 18 months now. That's not going to cut it. And you know it's not going to cut it. Right. And so I think
I keep thinking they think if they keep throwing something up against the wall with every layered contingency possible, they're suddenly going to get lucky. And there is no such thing as luck in this market.
No. And so I would ask the question, if you want to stick on the question asking train,
yes,
I would, as they're writing up the offer, I would ask the question, so explain to me from a seller's perspective, explain to me why you think this offer is going to succeed versus the others that you've written that have not succeeded. Can you kind of walk me through that, right? Because I want to be able to make sure I understand from where you're sitting exactly your strategy, so I can communicate that to the other side really clearly. So can you talk to me about why you believe this time is going to be different than the last 97 times?
That's a great question, actually, because it's like pulling teeth with them. And they're very nice people, don't get me wrong, but and he's an accountant, so he's Mr. Numbers, and that's all fine and good. But I think that's great.
It sounds to me like you have two things going on. I think it sounds to me like that you may have kind of know-it-all clients, right? Who want things on their terms, and things on their terms. The other opportunity is, look, things on your terms that went out the window 18 months ago, and it's likely not to come back for another 18 months or so. Right. So are you willing, here's another question. Are you willing to purchase a home on the seller's terms? If you're willing to purchase a home on the seller's terms, let's write that, prove it by what we write. If you're not willing to purchase a home based on the seller's terms, we're wasting our time. I like you, you like me, and yet, friends is not what we signed up for. We signed up to buy a house. So let's do the things necessary to actually get that done.
I
Those are my
I
couple
think
thoughts.
those two questions are perfect, and I haven't come up with that even with all the analysis I've done. But that's a great deal of help, because I am told them we need to sit down and have a regroup.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, let us know how it goes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. What else? Nothing, huh? All right, well, this was short-lived. Nobody has a question? Did you just have nothing better to do? Oh, okay, there we go.
I
Good,
have a
Erica.
question. I'm at work, so let me just turn my camera on really quick so you can see me. Okay, so my question is, I probably have a couple, but one of them is, how do you come in strong with a buyer that has a FHA loan in this market? And the reason why I asked that is because I recently put in an offer for my client who is FHA approved, and the listing agent on the seller side, they told me kind of like right off the bat, they didn't know what type of loan my client had, but they kind of said, we got an offer in for a FHA loan and it's at asking price. My sellers are not going to accept that. So I'll just like tell you that right off the jump, because I wanted more details on how, me and my buyer could come in strong. So any information that he can tell me about, how many offers he has, what type of offers and stuff like that. And he immediately said that to me. And of course we put in an offer and she ended up not getting it. I think they might have went the conventional way. I don't know if, I just find I'm feeling like it's just hard with the FHA loans to get a seller to accept offers with the FHA loans.
Sure. Well, so what I would say to you is that is likely because the sellers and perhaps listing agents don't understand FHA loans as well as maybe they should. The first thing I will say is, over and above whatever kind of financing somebody has, you've got to be strong in all the other areas, right? And with an FHA loan, if we know full well that the sellers and the listing agents at times, right, and this is not across the board, but there are people who have these opinions about government sponsored loans, right? And so if we know that going in, maybe we need to improve the other terms even more so, which may sound unfair, but that's the way life works, right? Sometimes life isn't fair. So what I mean is, if they're going $10,000 over the asking price and they have the FHA loan, well, maybe they need to find another $10,000 to go $20,000 over the asking price to ensure that the sellers pay attention. It's like you have to make the offer such that the sellers are sitting there, if they're unattracted to, if they find, wow, I can't stitch together a sentence. If they find the FHA loan unappealing, that's where I was going. You may have to wow them in other ways so that they're sitting there saying, oh my goodness, this is the offer we would go with. It is FHA. However, all these other things outweigh the fact that I struggle with FHA. The other thing that I would do is I would get with your mortgage partners, and I would have your mortgage partners write some kind of a blurb or an explanation as to why the FHA loan is such a powerful loan for buyers to use and why sellers should not be afraid of it. after our call, I will go to our mortgage partners and have each of them write something on your behalf. However, if you need something faster, go ahead and write it, because a lot of times it's a matter of opinion, right? Because at the end of the day, when the loan closes, it's all just money, right? Closing day, it's all just money. And so why do sellers and listing agents fear the FHA loan?
And we also we did, so they're at 3.5%, whatever down payment. So we did $10,000 over asking price. We also waived the inspection contingency because we knew it was like really fully renovated, new roof and new everything. And also, when they went out to do the appraisal, if there was something like drastically wrong, they would have picked that up with an appraisal since it was through an FHA loan. So we waived the inspection contingency, and we still did not get it. So I'm just like,
Right. What price point, Erica?
It was for $235 and we offered $245.
Yeah. So understand that in the mid twos, 10% over the asking price isn't $10,000. It's $20,000 or $25,000, right? So just being cognizant of the fact that we're in a market where people have to figure out that going over the top is what it takes, and what they think is over the top is likely not enough. We have to take what people think of as over the top and multiply it by 2, and then you're probably in the realm of because what the seller saw was it's only, quote unquote, only $10,000 over our asking price. Maybe they got an offer that was over that, or maybe they got one that was 10,000 over the asking price with more down, right? But my point is, I think you need to have an outside source explain the benefits of FHA and why FHA is not scary or shouldn't be scary to the list side of the transaction. Because that's what you're up against. You're up against preconceived ideas that, for whatever reason, they take longer or they're more complicated. Does the FHA loan come with an FHA appraisal? Sure. Are they typically that silly? I mean, Ariana and I just dealt with one on one of my properties where it was an FHA, and the appraisal came back, and we had struggles with conventional financing, right? So it's the struggles are not inherent to an FHA loan, right? And so it could happen with conventional financing. There are other issues that could happen with cash. I think having an extra document that you include from a third party saying, yes, these are really strong FHA people, and here's why we are certain that everything's going to just go swimmingly.
And
Can
I
only
was
help.
gonna, and I was
forever.
gonna add that. I was gonna add that too, about the fact that an FHA appraisal may bring up a repair or two that's not normal in a conventional appraisal. But it sounds like you handled it, which is good. That was what I was going to say. If you address that, listen, don't worry about it. If you feel comfortable with the house, that was good.
Yeah, brilliant. And Barbara just put in the chat that she had a mortgage lender do the same thing that we're describing for 100% VA loan, right, with some explanation. Because what the sellers and the listing agent need sometimes is education, and all times they need to have some comfort around the scenario. They need to feel comfortable, and so we need to wrap that warm blanket around them to say, don't worry, here's why this is going to be okay, right? And Barbara went on to say that when that happened, she got her 100% VA loan accepted. 100% is even more than 97.5%. So we're 96.5%. So I hope that helps. And just recognize that if cash isn't an option, right, that next step then is conventional financing. If conventional financing isn't an option, well, maybe then you have some government loans, right? Every step away from those cash offers, you have to simply be more aggressive and more, and wow the sellers more to be able to win. It's just the state of the market that we currently have.
I also try to talk to the listing agent and get as much info as I can about everything. I schmooze them all the way.
Yeah, I
think
mean,
that's a lot.
start with the questions. If it comes back and says, no, we're not doing FHA, talk to me about that. Can you talk to me about, is that your thought or is that the seller's thought? And where are the struggle points? Talk to me about what the struggle is on that, right? Sometimes it's just a matter of having a conversation. Jim.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that point, crazy market as we all know, but what I like to do too is, schmooze is a great thing, but also, as we know, a lot of realtors just like to talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. So I like to ask them as many questions possible. They don't have to answer them, but you never know what's going to slip out. And, it's really worked to my advantage last year with a few things just to find out, well, what are these sellers actually looking for? What's important to them? Is it a 45 to 90 day close? Well, because you're going in with 10%, it's like, well, I got somebody coming in with 25% down and this and that. But again, to that point, if to my colleagues out there, just ask as many questions as possible and let's see what slips out.
Yeah, very true. And, to help you guys do that a little bit more, what we're doing after family reunion, we heard of a seller's, what do they call it? A seller's, not demand sheet, a seller preference sheet or something to that effect, right? So we have listing agents across the country who are typing up here in a perfect world, here's what the seller is looking for, right? They're looking for all of these sorts of things. And then as offers come in, those sheets go out, or as offers get called, so Barbara calls me and says, hey, I have an offer coming in on 123 Main Street. I say, okay, hold on. I have a seller preference sheet. I send that to Barbara. She now has something to work with her buyers. And so we're not only recreating those forms for you to use as listing agents, we also believe that a blank can be used as a buyer's agent, right? If now I have buyers and I'm going to make an offer on one of Jim's properties, I'll call Jim to say, hey, you know what? We've been using these seller preference sheets. If you wouldn't mind, I'm going to email one over to you. If you could have your seller fill that out and get that back to me, we'll put things together, easy peasy lemon squeezy. Now, Jim may say, no, they're not going to do that, or may say, fine, send it to me. And the seller says, I don't want to do that, right? Those are all possibilities. And yet, as a buyer's agent, if you're doing everything possible to get the information that Jim and Mara are talking about from loose lips, well, let's have the loose lips complement a written piece of something from a seller. So that's what we're working on for you now. It should be done next week. What else?
Rick, can you hear me?
I can.
Wonderful. This may be a little bit off topic, but I know we're all spinning our wheels now to get listings, so on and so forth, or well, let's just keep it at that. But I'm wondering if you have anything handy that would show the best weekly plan or a daily planner. I know for myself, I need to ground myself again in making 2 hours of calls a day, things of that nature. Do you have anything that you have handy that you could email? Just as a reminder to put up on a whiteboard and say, okay, let me lock this in, because I need more structure, and it's always been my issue.
So do you mean some kind of a calendar that you could use?
Yeah, I'm almost like the ideal calendar / business plan for the week to, repeat, do again, rinse, repeat, do again.
Yeah. So I will tell you that as there's how many of us on this call? 24 of us on this call. There's probably 25 different versions of calendar that people use, right? And because it's some people are still working in a book on paper. Some people have migrated to Google Calendar or some kind of calendar app or software. What I can send you is I do have a couple of examples that some of your colleagues use in that in terms of paper, right? The one that I love has literally the piece. Is Debbie on the call? No, she's not. And so we were brainstorming a couple of years ago, and she was concerned that she wasn't honoring her lead generation time block. And I said, well, what do you put in there? Like what goes in your calendar? And she said, well, sometimes it's, it feels like an emergency. Sometimes it feels like I have to go and see a buyer, or sometimes it's this, or sometimes it's that. And I said, well, what if there was no way to actually write that into your calendar? She said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, let's create a calendar where that period of time from 9 to 11, whatever it is literally completely blacked out. So you cannot write in it. You can't see anything. You
Right.
So it reminds her. She's used that ever since. So I'm happy to send you that version. I
That'd be
think I have
wonderful.
another version or two that I can dig up. But what I would say to you is, if you're not used to a paper calendar, right, paper may not work. If you're used to doing everything kind of on your phone, you may want to look at some phone apps. Does anybody use like a phone app? I just use Google Calendar. I mean, I about 2 years ago, I moved from writing it down on paper because I would always lose the papers I was writing things on. So I finally went to Google, and now my calendar is just built in Google. And I sit here, my Google Calendar's on my big screen right here, and I literally just follow it through the day. So part of it is a discipline, right? Part of it's a mindset to just follow what you create. But get clear for yourself what you'll use more. If your phone is better, then maybe a phone app is better. If you think paper works, I'll get you what I have.
That'd be great.
Sure. Does anybody use any kind of other phone apps other than anything other than Google Calendar? Lisa, you're muted.
Oh, I use iCal on my Mac.
Okay, iCal on the Mac, right? So that's another one. Okay, looks like we have a lot of Google users. Google or paper? What else?
Or both, I said.
Or both? Yeah. What else?
I have a question. I don't know if-
Before we move off of there, Ronnie, and I'll get to you right after this. There's also a session. Do I have this open? Let me just see. So James Shaw on the 21st of March, he's doing a 4-hour session called Time Management with the 411. If you go to, I think it's JD Shaw Training. I have to let me see if I can find that website. It's like his name or something like that. All right, I can't find it. I'll send it out. So that may be something that you want to take a look at. I was asked to buy a ticket to that and broadcast it to the market centers, and that's a class that James is charging for, and so I don't, without his permission, and I will ask him if I can buy a ticket for each of our locations and have people come to the training room to experience that. So I'm happy to do that. But I was asked if I would buy that and then broadcast it on our own Zoom, and I just don't think that's fair to grab one ticket for 600 people. So I will see if I can get James's okay on purchasing a ticket for each of our locations and having people come in and watch it together on that. That's the 21st of March. And again, I thought I could find. No, I can't find the website quickly, so I'll get it to you. Ronnie.
I'm unmuted, right? Okay. Yeah, I have a question. In multiple bid offer and highest, I've gotten different things, highest and best. So there seems to be two things. My client calling me. Highest and best, to me, I think, okay, you put your offer in and then whoever's the highest would win, or feasibly. But in some cases, so in this case, they came back and they said what the highest offers were. So, and that they had two offers and this was the highest. So my client came back and offered higher. So I'm thinking I have the highest bid because I'm not getting any info. But then, of course, when it's like the end, well, he picks, I'm like, how does the person have a higher offer? You never gave us an opportunity to partake, you know, because you told me your two highest were this, and I brought you one. And I thought, I'm waiting, and I keep asking. So it's so frustrating because, what is it? I mean, obviously the seller can pick whoever they like. I get that. But, you know, I guess, you know, it sounds like to me, some people do highest and best and they just take the highest one. Some people do highest and best and come back and let you know what the highest was. Is there any like terminology or it just, that's just the way it is. You know what I'm saying? It's, I
Yeah,
guess.
it's seller's discretion, right? And so the reason it feels like it's different every time is because it can be different every time, right? Because the seller gets to make those decisions. There are sellers who, you know, and most of you know how much I dislike that phrase, highest and best. It's something I hope you guys aren't using. I would so encourage you to, as listing agents, to go in a different direction, right? If you really want to come back to everybody and say, hey, you know what, we're giving everyone one last opportunity by 7 o'clock tonight to address, revise, whatever, any price or terms that they think they want to revise to make it their most attractive offer, right?
Okay, no, I was just writing down what you were saying.
So, but the answer to your question, oh yes, and Tama and I must have heard the same thing. Tama says in the chat, I've heard the phrase most attractive offer. Yeah, I think that is a far better conversation to have. Frankly, I think you get more from buyers if you don't go back and say, we're pitting everyone against everybody, so everyone fight over their highest and best. It's just, the terminology itself is contentious. So I just like it. I don't think it's in my seller's best interest, so I never used it as a listing agent. That being said, people can go and make decisions however they choose to make decisions. If they are asking for the most attractive offer by a certain period of time, it feels like decisions should then be made from there. And I have had sellers who honored that and said, yep, everyone was given a certain period of time to come up with whatever they wanted to. Based on that, here's what it all looks like. Yeah, and yet there are times where a seller will say, yeah, okay, well, so I really want to accept that one, except this one came in with maybe some more money. So what if this one will pay what this one has offered because I like their terms better? Or what if this one is willing to do the terms of this one, right? And so now instead of 7 offers, we're down to 2, right? Because now the seller is kind of going back and forth, and maybe the seller picks one and says, hey, will you pay more? Or will you waive this? Or maybe they go back to both and say, hey, so we're down to 2. This is what we're looking at. Will you do this or that other thing? Or, you know, so it's a matter of, it's always a matter of price and terms together. It's not just a matter of,
Right, no, understand.
and it's, you know, it's a version of what you're experiencing is a little bit of a version of the Wild West, right? And in a market moving this quickly, the seller and the listing agent oftentimes feel as though they have the right and the opportunity, because they do have the right and the opportunity to behave a little more like the Wild West, which is irritating on the buy side. I get it, and yet it is where we're at.
Right. So the next question that evolves from that is,
and so before you go to the next question,
sure.
So on the buy side, one of the things that I would be certain I was doing is, again, set really clear expectations with your buyers. So when the buyer is getting ready to do their highest and best or most attractive terms, make sure that you're having the conversation that says, okay, so just remember that it feels as though we're being asked for the very top and the very best and the very everything. And that what's going to happen is they're simply going to make a decision based on what's put into them. That happens a lot of the time. However, it doesn't happen all of the time. So I don't want you to be freaked out, upset, or surprised if the sellers come back and say, okay, well, we've whittled it down to 2, or if they come back to you and say, we want to accept your offer, but we need $10,000 more, or we need you to waive this inspection or whatever, right? Because they do have an opportunity to continue to negotiate past any kind of highest and best terms deadline that they set. That way the buyer knows that that's a possibility, which I think helps each of you explain to the buyer when it comes back that way, so that it's not like a big shock. Part of the reason it's frustrating to you guys is because you don't want to have to bring that news back to the buyer, right? And so if we preset that expectation that that's a possibility, and then it happens, well, then you just, I mean, it's still disappointing to them sometimes, but you look kind of brilliant because you've already said that that was a possibility. Sorry, so that's the other piece of this that I would address, is set even better, clearer expectations with buyers so that they know what can come back. That way no one is surprised. What else?
No, I mean, that's very helpful, because that was kind of my next question is, it's kind of hard, because I would be in the same thing, is that it's very easy for the people you're working with to, one, be disappointed, and the only person that they have to think that disappointed them is, in some ways, is you as well, like, or maybe you didn't do this, or maybe you didn't say that, or maybe, and I know on my end, I did everything I can, and like you say, if they also didn't, bring to the table certain information, I can only ask, that's all I can do. But I guess, that was my point. I guess you're saying be upfront. My point was, how do you get to the point where they don't think it's you, or that they're not taking you for the blame of losing the deal? So it's more being prepared to set them up if what happens, and that how it all works, I guess.
Yeah, it's 100% expectations, right?
Mhm.
Because if all you've done every step of the way is tell them exactly how it was going to go, right? It's also being directive and being clearer as they're writing the offer, right? There's nothing wrong with there's nothing wrong with them being aggressive, and then you asking the question, are you sure that's going to be aggressive enough? Based on the market conditions we reviewed, based on the last 2 offers that you lost, based on what I'm seeing every single day, are you sure it's aggressive enough? Let me ask you this: if in fact there's another $10,000 in your pocket that changes your monthly payment by, $30 that you don't put on the table now, and they come back and say they went in a different direction, will you regret not putting that extra $10,000 on the table? And if so, does it make sense just to do it? Right. And so one of the things that I used to say back in the old days, before we experienced what we've just experienced in the last 2 years, is, look, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, the very last thing that you will almost ever hear from me is the phrase, just spend more money. That's not the business I'm in. However, there are certain scenarios where just spend more money is exactly what the strategy may need to be. And certainly in a market moving this quickly, we're in one of those scenarios. And so I don't want you to hear it incorrectly. This is not me not being on your side. This is not me being unsupportive. It's me looking to help you strategize to figure out how to win in a market that is difficult to win in, right? Are we setting those expectations? Are we being really clear? Are we being honest and transparent about what we can control and what we can't control? Those are all those expectation setting conversations that I think, here's the thing: when you're sitting writing an offer, make sure that it takes you 15 minutes longer than you think it should from a time perspective. And what I mean by that is, you now have to find a way to fill those 15 minutes, and you have to fill those 15 minutes with additional expectation setting conversations, and just be really, really clear about what this is, what it's not, what might happen, how it looks. If they've lost properties before, again, ask them the same question we talked about with Lisa before.
You know what the hardest, at least what I think is just very hard, is that part of our job is to look and see what other homes are selling for, and do comps. And then in a lot of these situations, for instance, in this, regardless, that's like out the door because the market is so changing so fast that it's like, I mean, I can't believe the prices that were just like put on the
Right.
table.
So
from
here's
the work
so here's
that
what I
you're
want you,
doing.
here's what I want you to do. I want you to use this example next time you're talking with your buyers, right? Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, the comps are based on closed properties, which are done, which are appraised prior to them closing, right?
Right.
And so have you ever, I'm curious, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, have you ever traveled by plane? Well, yes. Okay, great. So you know that a plane goes really, really fast down the runway, right? And at some point they pull up and it starts to lift off. And so the plane starts to gain altitude. Yes, have you experienced this? Okay, great. And so so I want you to picture, here's the plane going down the runway. Just at that moment of liftoff, right? You can kind of feel it in your belly. That's the snapshot in time that the appraisers and the closings and the comps that we're reviewing represent. Understand that time keeps moving, just like the plane. The plane keeps gaining altitude. And so now we're 3 weeks later, or 4 weeks later, or 6 weeks later, or 8 weeks later from these comps. Where is the plane now? Maybe it's now at 35,000 feet.
comparison.
Maybe it's leveled off, right? But even if it's leveled off, it didn't level off down here. It leveled off at 35,000 feet. And you're creating, you're utilizing data that was at
Yeah,
3,000.
exactly.
And so you have to be willing and able to make up the difference in the time. I just love that as a visual
Yeah,
because
no,
it's
a good
really, really
comparison.
clear, right?
Yeah, thanks.
Does that help?
Appreciate it. Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Sure. Barbara. You're still muted, Barbara.
I like to use the escalation clause with my buyer clients a lot because they'll ask me like, how high should we go? And I say to them, you can always go in $5,000 increments over the next highest offer and top out at what is very most you would not feel bad about losing the house to. And that saves me from feeling like I didn't give them enough information or that it could go higher than even any of us expect. But it gives them that room to, and then thinking about it in 5,000 increments is not so big a deal. It's like saying 20,000 over or, whatever. It can be incremental. Anyway, that's what I do to make myself feel less liable if something goes awry.
Yeah, I love that, right? So utilizing escalation clauses, it's funny because when we first came back out of lockdown in 2020 and the market started to blast off, all we talked about for the first 8 months or 9 months or so was escalation clauses, right? And then in the last 9 months or so, listing agents seem to have gotten wise to escalation clauses and they started to back away from accepting them. What I've seen in the last couple of months is that we're back to agents who use them because everybody said no, no, no. So a lot of agents pulled back and then weren't using them. Well, if you're the only one now who moves back forward and uses it, oftentimes you're the only escalation clause on the table, and you can use that as a win as well. And that way you don't have to do the guesswork, right, of how much higher should we go. I love that idea, Barbara. And again, for those of you who have experienced listing agents coming back and saying, no, we're not accepting those, just give us a number. Do they have a right to do that? Well, let me ask it differently. Do sellers have a right to advise their agents to bring that to the table? Yes, 100%, right? And so if that's the case, then just redo the offer and put a number on it. However, because the reason the list side of the transaction got resistant to escalation clauses is because many agents started to use them. And so the listing agent and the seller started to get, the transaction started to get really complicated because we had 12 offers and there were 9 escalation clauses. And at some point you needed like some kind of a physics degree to figure out what we were escalating off of. And, with a mathematics minor to make sure that you really figured out who was bouncing off of who and what we were escalating, right? So a lot of listing agents said, stop. Now though, because so many people stopped, if you're the one who has it, you're oftentimes the only one.
And I put a cap on it. We put a cap on it, so it doesn't go crazy, you know?
Yes, and so you can put a cap on it, certainly. You can also leave them uncapped, right? Depending on what the buyer clients are looking at. What else? Nothing else?
Rick,
Yes.
Rick, back to the escalation clause. Would you suggest, because this is what my intuition tells me, that the gap, say you do, I've done 5,000, but I've also had clients come in with a lot of contingencies. And would you suggest, I mean, I've started to say that that increment that you're going to escalate to needs to be commensurate with the contingencies that you're asking for. So if you're asking for everything under the sun, $5,000 increment probably won't do it.
Yeah, I'll answer that two ways. The first way I'll answer it is as a listing agent, right? Because unfortunately, it's how I hear things. I can't help it. I think on the list side first, and so my first answer would be, this is lovely. You have a $50,000 escalation clause. However, you got to get rid of all these contingencies before we're even going to look at your escalation clause, right? And so if buyers are still putting all these contingencies in, they have to recognize that a lot of sellers know today, they know they can squeeze more money out of their house. That it's an expectation, right? And so I find that sellers are erring on the side of, okay, regardless of the money that all these 10 offers have, these 6 offers have, these 2 offers have, whatever, what are the terms? Let's start and figure out who has the best terms. Okay, that person has the best terms. All right, where's the best number? Where's the best price?
Yep.
Okay, that person, great. So I want this person with the best terms to pay that much money.
Right.
That's what I see sellers doing, right? And it's what I hear from you guys that sellers are doing. And
That's what I'm seeing, but
yeah. So my point then is, if they're stuck on the contingencies, it may not matter what the escalator is. That's my first answer. My second answer is, yes, based on the conversation that we had with Erica before, if there's some piece of the offer that doesn't sing, maybe you need to compensate for that one piece of it. So if the terms are a little tough, maybe you need to compensate with the price, right? And so it's a back and forth. But again, I think that my first answer, in more circumstances than not nowadays, my first answer is likely going to be the reality you run into, where even if it's a bigger escalator, and remember too, don't think about escalators or making offers over asking or any of those don't think about it financially. It's not about $40,000 over the asking price. It's about what percent of the actual transaction are you offering over the asking price, because $5,000 increments, when $5,000 represents 10% of the asking price, is very different when it as to when $5,000 represents 2%, right? So now the escalators need to match the arena that you're playing in.
that's a good point. And yeah, the only reason I was saying that was when you get some buyers that are just dead, first-time home buyers, very apprehensive, and dead set on risk reduction.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
and again, those buyers today,
They're
My
not gonna
advice
get
to them,
anywhere.
yeah, well, my advice to them would be, you know what, this is just going to make everyone frustrated. Like, why don't, let's take 6 months off and I'll keep you posted as to if the market changes.
Right.
There's just not a whole lot of reason for them to be in the market because it's only going to sour them on the process.
Exactly. Thanks.
So advise them to sit it out. And again, we'll keep you posted as things get shift a little bit more towards giving buyers any kind of power, because they have pretty much zero today, right?
Yeah. But I
Funny.
like that idea of the percentage.
Yeah, keep
That's,
it.
I had not thought of that.
Yeah, and so there's that on that side. And so for listing agents on the call, remember commissions as well. I want to bring to your attention that commissions is the opposite conversation. Don't always think about commissions in terms of what percentage you are getting and die on your sword about a percentage. Do the math out and then ask yourself a question. Am I willing to work on the list side of this particular transaction for X number of dollars? Right? Because sometimes, I mean, there have been times in my career where for things in the higher end, well, yeah, I would love to earn 3.5% of $2 million. And yet, am I really willing to walk away from a transaction if instead of that much money, am I willing to do the same work for $60,000? Right? I mean, remember, we live and work in an area that our percentages translate into very different dollars than a lot of our counterparts across the rest of the country and around the world. And so just always take that into consideration when you're trying to make a decision. I've seen way too many people die on their sword for their 2.5% or 3%. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't fight for your commission. Those of you who know me for more than 10 minutes know that that's not my deal at all. And yet I do want you to be smart about it. I want you to make smart business decisions and do the math. And then ask that additional question. Sorry, Ronnie, go ahead.
I'm just trying to understand the escalation clause. And so would that be something like on, let's say he was doing a offer to purchase, so it's not a legal client, you would just attach that to the offer to purchase and explain in the escalation clause, I guess, in what you're doing.
Sure. It is just that. It is a 2-sentence clause that gets added on as kind of more of like an addendum.
Okay.
That
Like a rider or something,
that speaks to, instead of filling out the numbers in the offer piece of whatever document you're using, you'd kind of put an asterisk and say, see escalation clause. And the escalation clause then just simply says, offer price to be $10,000 higher than the highest verifiable offer with a cap of $785,000.
Okay, so you're basically telling them what your cap, you're giving them the cap, so you're telling them what your highest is that you'll go to? Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
Absolutely. Yep. I'm going to tell you what, if I were working with buyers today, one of the questions I would ask is, so let me ask you this, how interested are you in winning? And when they say very, okay, so for this particular property, you're gonna want to like bat me across the head when you hear my question. But what is legitimately the highest price you will pay for this particular property? What does that look like? Let's figure out from a financing perspective where that sits. What is your monthly payment based on that? Right? Because here's the thing, guys. Has anyone ever purchased a property utilizing financing where the amount that is paid is remembered or even known 2 months later? Not usually, because you buy based on a monthly payment. Your mortgage payment is what you pay every single month. I keep being asked, even to this day, why are you still buying investment properties? Right? Don't they cost you a whole lot more? Yeah, of course they do. Just like any buyer, I have to pay more for them. Right? But doesn't much matter to me what I'm paying for them. I mean, within reason, right? Doesn't matter to me what I'm paying for them. I look at do the numbers work? So what's the debt service on that? Do the rents increase? Do the rents outperform the debt service? And does it make sense to buy it at that number? Would I love to buy it $30,000 less? Sure. But $30,000 less only changes the payment by, whatever that is. It's just not a lot of money. So we have to help people understand that. And unfortunately, a lot of us are prone to saying things like, oh, goodness, wow, I can't let you overpay for that. Here's what I can tell you. You almost immediately know you're pedaling down the wrong path if what you're saying to your clients starts with, I can't let you. It's not your role, right? It's not your role. It's interesting because I see Ariane on the call, and so I'm going to use her as an example, right? And so Ariane represents me on all of my investment properties. I don't think that she has ever one time in all of those purchases started a sentence in a conversation with me that started with, I can't let you. She's never done that. She has said things like, so I've uncovered X, Y, and Z, and here are the potential pitfalls with that. What do you want to do? Because what she knows is that it's not her decision. It's not about her opinion, right? She's there as my legal advisor to give me the pros and the cons and the options based on the information that we have. And guys, I'm here to tell you that your role is the same, just not from don't interpret legal contracts, please, right? I didn't mean that part of it, right? But to me, that's when you're really a fiduciary, that's the role.
It is not our decision. Yes, it's always the clients. They
Right.
can do whatever they want,
Yeah.
as long as they have been advised.
Yeah. My guess is that if we took truth serum, right, and we gave Ariane some truth serum and asked her, have there been things that Rick has done in the last couple of years in his purchases that you personally maybe wouldn't have done, or you personally thought were a little bit on the edge or risky or whatever? My guess is that she would say yes.
No, not at all. You're a very smart business person. You got it all. The legal head.
Right. But the idea is, even if that were the case, you kind of just have to, you have those conversations from the perspective of, here are the pros, here are the cons, here are the options.
I would probably also just have the client put it in an email to you as well. So you have that info to refer back to in case they have a memory lapse.
Yes. I call that selective amnesia. Right, which happens a lot. So cover yourself from selective amnesia by verifying, right? Have them put it in an email to you, or you put it in an email back to them, right? So Ariane, just confirming what we spoke about in terms of your decisions about this particular house, if you could please just confirm back to me that I have all that correct, right? You can send it to them and then have them reply in the affirmative so that you have that back and forth. I'm not sure how we got down this bunny trail, but I hope that was helpful to whomever asked the question that we started with this all on. What else? We have a minute. We have a couple of minutes left. Any last questions, comments, concerns? Going once? Going twice?
Rick, it's Lloydie. Are you going to call me?
Yes, I will.
Okay, thank you.
Boy, that was an easy question. What else?
Hey, Mark. Sorry, geez. Hey, Rick. I know
Yes.
who you are.
Yes, sir.
Can we talk a little bit about, because I've gotten this from one client definitely, and maybe one other less directly, but the quote unquote bubble. You know, I feel like this bubble's going to pop. I'm buying something that's going to be worth less in 6 months, 12 months. And I feel like I've thrown up every bit of data, and there's a digging in of heels that, quite frankly, I've just decided, you know, it's not worth me continuing to press and say, no, this is what data supports, because it's essentially not getting through. So I'm curious as to how you would approach this notion of we're in a housing bubble, it's going to pop, values are going to drop.
Yeah, well, so the first thing I would do is I would absolutely agree with anyone who says at some point prices are going to drop. That's a different conversation than we're in a bubble, right? Because markets are cyclical. Of course they're going to. If we're at the top, we're at the peak, like in history, like in the history of Earth. So of course they're going to recede. When and how that's going to happen, how steeply, how sharply, how quickly, over what period of time? Do we have another year, another 2 years, another 3 years of appreciation ahead of us? Do we have a couple of years of flattening out before things start to recede? It's simply impossible to know. The next way I would address that is, so my point is, I would stop arguing it. And when someone says, I'm concerned about the bubble, I would ask another question. Well, so can you be clearer about that? Are you concerned about a sharp decline in housing? Or are you concerned about the fact that at some point values will recede? Because they're two different conversations, right? There's no indication today. Now, of course, a week ago, because the other thing I was going to say is how many of you tuned in to Gary's vision speech, because he talked about this in the vision speech, right? So the idea of there being a bubble versus no bubble, it being kind of irrelevant is where he went. The data doesn't suggest, because the last time the bubble burst, there were external influences that created that, right? The whole financial meltdown and subprime issue and all that stuff, there were external factors that created that. Now, of course, a week ago, one of the things that he put on the screen, because what's today? Tuesday. So it was 9 days ago. One of the things he put on the screen as a disclaimer, it said, okay, so everything we just talked about is determined by a couple of things. One of them being whether or not Russia invades the Ukraine. If Russia invades the Ukraine, well, now that's a world event that could have overreaching effects into our economy that could change things. Right now, I was just reading a couple of things yesterday and the day before saying, you know, at this point in time, based on where the U.S. is, it's unlikely, that event is unlikely to have a major effect on U.S. real estate transactions. It might have a minor effect, but it certainly isn't a precipitating cause for everything to now lose 20% in value. Right? We are still an economy, and in our industry, certainly driven by supply and demand. And what we know is that the demand is still high and the supply is still low. And so you know, what is now a regional conflict in Eastern Europe doesn't affect our supply and demand. It just doesn't. Okay. So how am I answering your question? I'm answering your question by saying, if we're talking about people who are actually going to move into the house, to me, the conversation is absolutely irrelevant, right? How long are you going to be in the house? Right? If you're talking about a flipper, someone who's going to buy and then flip, well, there may be more risk to be a flipper right now if in fact there's a thought that values might recede. if you're a buy and hold investor, you just heard me say, which maybe is where this question came from. You just heard me say, maybe I'm a dope. Maybe I'm an idiot. Maybe I will go down in history as you shouldn't have been purchasing during this period of time because it's coming back to bite you. But as long as my properties are cash flowing, it only matters when I'm looking to be a seller. So who cares if I don't expect the properties I'm buying to maintain their values. I don't. And frankly, I never, for those of you who've been to my seminar, I never expected the properties I bought 8 years ago to ever increase in value. The fact that they did is just kind of a bonus. And yet, unless I'm a seller right now, who cares? Like on paper, my balance sheet looks really good, but that's all just paper money. So I guess what I would do is I would agree so that it's not you versus them. I would encourage anyone you're talking to show you the crystal ball they're using to determine that, right? Because if they will share that crystal ball with us, well, then we could probably answer their question a whole lot better, right? Ha ha ha, because there is no crystal ball. And then I would pivot the conversation to say, you know, let's talk about what you're concerned about. Even if you do buy high, what's the concern there? As an investor, as long as it cash flows, who cares? As someone who's going to live in the house, you're going to move in, it's a monthly payment. You're getting a 30-year fixed interest rate. So does it really, as long as the monthly payment makes sense to you, what does it matter? And why are you in the market today to begin with? If you can wait a year and you think that things will be better in a year, then let's wait a year. My concern for you though, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, is that interest rates are doing what right now? Are they going down or they're going up? Yeah, they're going up. And so I'm curious, do you think they may continue to go up or do you think they might take a nosedive? Yeah, the trending says that they're more likely to go up than they are to go back down. Just because we're still at near historic lows, right? There's almost only one way for them to go. And so if you wait a year and prices come down a little bit, but your buying power has eroded, aren't you in the same place? And so does it make sense to rent for another year? Does it make sense to live with your parents for another year? Does it make sense to stay squished in with your 4 children in that 3-bedroom house for another year? You know, what are you trying to solve? And does the pain of that issue outweigh the potential negatives that might occur at some point in the future? I don't know. I can't live my life that way, guys. It's all about what might happen someday if the world should fall apart. Yeah. Well, what if it doesn't fall apart? What if it stays awesome? What if I spend the next year, instead of worrying about pricing of houses, living and enjoying the house that I just purchased? What if I did that instead? What if my kids got to have their own room? What's more important to you than the price that you purchase at? That was a little bit of a soapbox, Ryan. So I'm sorry about that. I didn't mean to preach, but that does that help at all?
Yeah, don't apologize at all, please, because that's that larger view. I tend to get sucked into these questions and dwell in the details. And I think that perspective really is much more effective at moving the conversation forward than, well, what makes you think about, you know, this is going to drop, and that bigger picture of, well, what do you want to be doing for the next year? Where do you want to be living? What does your life look like during that time? And I think that's a much more collaborative approach to it. So,
and it's a consultative approach, right? So when you bring a consultant's view to all of that, because here's the thing, as someone who has worked on both sides of this coin, I can tell you that one is really better, right? There's a version of this where we feel like we have to have the right answers and produce the right answers, and then produce the backup to support our right answers. That's one version of this. The other version, which is far more enjoyable as a business person, is the consultative and collaborative path forward to say, yeah, you know what? Your guess is as good as mine. Great question. I don't have those answers. We can look at trending. before we even get into any of the detail work, let's talk about what's important to you. Why did that question come up? What are your concerns? Where do those concerns come from? And how can we help mitigate some of that? Is there something more important than that concern that you're attempting to solve? Should we put that first and this second? If we're putting that first and this second, does it make a difference as to whether or not prices go down by a couple of percentage points over the next year if interest rates are going to climb by a full percent? I don't know. It's, and are you willing to roll the dice? That's just two people having a conversation. It's not somebody providing, right? Be careful that you're not pumping yourself up to have to be the provider of all things real estate. Because in circumstances like that, you're in a no-win scenario if you choose to come from that perspective. You've got to ask some more questions, and you've got to ask better questions, and be okay with whatever the decision is. You
That's
can even
great.
get to a point with a buyer where they say, yeah, you know what? No, I just don't think now is the right time. I get it. Respectfully, I have a slightly different opinion about that, right? I'm still buying investment properties, or I have clients who are still buying investment properties, right? So the good news is we can agree to disagree on that. So tell me how best I can help you, knowing that your choice is to kind of wait that year. Should we take a pause? Should I keep you posted? Should I give you monthly updates, right? You're still asking questions. It's okay to disagree. It's okay to have different viewpoints. Frankly, I think if the more of the world would understand that it's okay not to have to agree on everything, we wouldn't live in the world that we live in today. It's all right to have different opinions.
Very true. Thank you so much.
Sure thing. Barbara, last one, and then we're out.
I had a conversation this weekend with an older couple who wanted to leave their home to go to another home, and they're just going back and forth now with what happened in Ukraine. They were very concerned. What's going to happen to the world? What's going to happen to the prices? Would they be overpaying? And so I really wasn't sure where to go. So I was just listening to them. And then they said, you know what, we're going to just need a couple of hours to think about this, and then we'll get back to you. And I said, thank them very much. That's great. I said, one of the questions you might ask yourself is, should anything happen, no matter what happens, from tomorrow on, where would you rather be? And then they called back and said they'd rather be in the other house so they can get it. So, but I didn't know what to say. It was like, all I could was like, okay, so where would you be if everything else, no matter what scenario took place, where would you rather be, here or in that house you were looking at?
That's a great question, Barbara. I hope everyone wrote that down, because that's a really great question, right? And it's a consultative, collaborative question. And I appreciate you being transparent about that, Barbara, and starting with like, okay, so like, where do I bring this? But the skill that you brought to the table was not getting caught in the weeds, right? Because there's almost never a win in the weeds. You brought it high level and asked a very simple. Remember, emotion makes them think. No, logic makes them think. Emotion makes them act, right? So logic is good for, okay, we're going to think this through and try and come up with the right answer. But the way that people take action is when you bring a level of emotion to it. How do you feel about that? And Barbara just gave you a perfect example of that, because they had the details. They understood what was going on. They understood the choices they had. They understood the pros and the cons. Barbara's question forced them to ask themselves how they felt about it. How would you feel if something happened in the world in that house versus how would you feel about being in that house? Masterful. I love it. Thank you, Barbara. All right, guys. That's it for me today. I hope this was helpful. And
Thank you
as
so much.
always, I appreciate spending time with you. I will see you tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp for our Wednesday Zoom call. Have a great afternoon. See you soon.
Thank you, Rick.
Bye.